Mrs. LeGrone, our guest today, as we talk about things and happenings in the past in Panola County. A couple of announcements first. The Panola County Historical and Genealogical Association Cookbook Committee is excited, I understand.
Oh, man. They have really gotten recipes that's going to make a wonderful cookbook. They're excited to death about it.
Very good. A little puff of wind got everybody's attention last night or yesterday?
Yes, yes. And blew we didn't know when it happened, but one of the city policemen stopped to tell us that we had a loose sheet of metal roofing of some kind on the front of our building, just up over on the roof, and it could fall and hurt somebody if it were not attached. And of course, it might have punctured our building roof. And when they investigated, they found out it had blown off of the water tower.
The old water tower. Oh,
yeah, you see, it stands right against, close to our building, so that'll have to be gotten off.
Well, maybe we can twist Charles Thomas's arm.
I'm sure he's already
send someone over to search out the problem.
Yes, I'm sure they've already been on it. I went by to see it yesterday afternoon, but I haven't been this morning.
Let's hope there's no damage.
I'm sure there's not any major damage from it.
And I understand that the Family Research Center has been extremely busy.
Yes. The lady that had written about her, called me about her parents that we talked about a few.
From California?
Yes. A Sunday afternoon, she and her husband were there, plus about a dozen other people's cousins she'd gathered up. So we had a stampede. And she was
You had a family reunion,
oh,
didn't you?
yes. She was so grateful. She had visited a bunch of these cousins and had so much information to take home with her.
Well, now, you informed me that we're going to do something a little different today, and you always do it with a smile on your face, and I can remember back in the classroom when you'd say that. It was always a pleasant experience.
Well, I hope this will be. One of the things that I love to do is tell stories. The story that I decided on for today is a little different from what we've been doing. It is a research story, for sure, and it really happened. But it took some time to put it together and some interviews with people and some searching of the records. But it happened all right, and it's a very fascinating story about what happened to one family. And I know that they were there because I have gone to their graves, and I mean the graves of this principal character, and the others were buried in the woods. And nobody ever knew where those graves were. But this is a real story of a real person who lived in this county, and they called her Aunt Mimmie. Now, Aunt Mimmie grew up and lived with the Fur family. And practically everybody that hears us this morning will know about George Fur and this family of Furs over on the east side of the county. And this has to do with that family, along with Aunt Mimmie, who was not a Fur, but who grew up at the Fur home. And so it means that I'll just tell Mimmie's story.
Okay.
And it is a thrilling story of what happened to Pioneer family. Back in the 1840s, a family moved into this county, a family named Jarman, Robert Jarman and his family. He and his wife had two little children when they came here, and they built a cabin on this side of the river, but their friends were on the other side, and this was over on the river, this side of the Midiot community, if you know where the Midiot community is, over beyond the river on the east side of the county. They were the only ones living back at this place because they just cleared a place in the woods and built. And they were, of course, they had plenty of wild game, and he was a hunter. And there they lived. They lived poor like pioneers did, but they enjoyed the beautiful nature and birds and had plenty to eat from little patches that they grow. They grew little patches of corn and that sort of thing, and then you kill wild game. Okay, here they spent their lives, and their travel was done by ox wagon. They came in by ox wagon and two old oxen. In the midst of this story, one of them died, but They went by wagon. The Primitive Baptist Church that was at Midiat community was the church that they joined, and they made friends with the Pelham families and the Fur families and the Jeters they're still in that area. And there they went to church, and they'd go by ox wagon. It's just a wagon road through the woods, and they had to cross the river when they went. Okay, I give you that setting for you to understand the Jarman family. There was Robert Jarman and his wife Eliza, and their two little children. And then, as the story begins, they have a third baby. And they go back and forth to school, and I mean not to school, to church. There were no schools there at that time. And this was a one weekend in a month, and they loved going. And this time when they went to church, they introduced the fact that they had a 2-month-old baby. They missed church last month, and they had a 2-month-old baby. And her name was, I believe, Liz, they called her. Elizabeth was her name. And she was 2 months old, and they proudly showed her off. And so the boy, the son, at the time of the beginning of the story now, the real story, the boy's 9 years old. And his sister Mimmie is 4, nearly 5. And then the baby now is 2, and when something happens to their parents. Now, the thing that is mysterious is what happened to them. And it was some disease that hit the swamp area. And I have found definite historical evidence that several families died out totally along the river. But Robert himself had decided that it was time to move out of the river bottom with 3 children. If anything happened to him and his wife, they'd be into it. They'd be across the river from all the friends they had, all the people they knew. And those children, he thought, had to get out of there. So he had made his decision, but he made it too late. He was already sick. And in the night, then the very night they made the decision after the kids had gone to sleep, he took high fever. Well, this frightened Liza, his wife, and she didn't want the children to know because they thought he could conquer anything. He was their protector. And wolves howled around their house at night, but they were never afraid of wolves because Papa was there. Well, this night he got very ill, and by the next morning was not able to get up. And before that day was over, the wife also was ill with this strange fever. Now, it probably was yellow fever, because yellow fever did wipe out whole communities. But anyway, it was a very rapid one, and he died before the next morning. And she was so sick she didn't know what was going on. And she just, when Bob, the boy, 9-year-old boy, got inside, out of the kitchen into the little sleeping area, he realized that his mother was sick and not even able to walk, and he got her on the bed with his father, not knowing that his father was dead. And according to the story, a stranger came riding along the wagon road, crossed the river, and happened by and had camped on the river. This was common, you know, people riding horseback. And he stopped to visit, and the little boy begged him to go in and help him with his parents. They were both sick. And the man went in, and he discovered that the father was dead, and the wife was unconscious. And before that day ended, the stranger dug 2 graves and buried them. They both died. And by sundown that day, there was nobody but 3 little children. And a 9-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And that night, the stranger, rode away, left them. He couldn't take the responsibility of three strange children. And they sat all night, Bob, the boy did, trying to decide how he was going to get them out of there. He knew he had to. He knew Papa was gone. And he could not keep the wolves away if they, if they insisted on coming, and they heard them howling at night. Papa had always built big fires in the open fireplace, so that's what he did, and all night long stoked the fire. But he said to Mimmie, Mimmie, we got to leave here. We got to get out of here. Papa's gone, and he's our protector, and so we got to go. In the morning, we got to hold on to little Liz's hand, because Papa said there were some bad holes in the river, that if we fell in the bad hole, we might drown. Now, you've learned to swim, he said, and I can swim, but Liz doesn't know how to swim. So, of course, he didn't talk with proper language. It was very country language that he talked with because they were backwoodsmen. Anyway, he says, we got to go, and we got to get her across, so that if either of us steps in a hole, we'll hold on to Liz and get her across. And all they had to carry with them was some dried turkey and some roasted corn. And so they put that in a sack, and he tied it around his shoulders, around his neck. And they took Liz's hand at sunup and headed across the river. He turned the one old oxen, the good one had died. He turned the other old oxen out and said, maybe someday I'll come back for him. And they crossed the river where it was lowest and got across safely. But of course they all waded and were all wet. But that didn't matter to country kids if they weren't sick. But of course what he didn't know was he was sick himself, and so was little Liz. But they didn't know that. But they got across the river and they knew the wagon road to Brother Pelham's. And they wanted to get to Brother Pelham's house, which was over in Midian. And that was a long walk for children. When you'd walk it today, you'd give out. And they stopped when they got up in the hill area under a pine tree and ate their meal of dried turkey and parched corn. And they had brought along a jug of spring water. And then they left the sack there, and by then, little Liz was so tired she couldn't keep up with them, so he took her on his shoulder. And he realized that she was cold and chilly from the wet dress that she had on. But he says, we got to get there. And storm clouds began to come up, and it took them hours to make the walk. And Liz was sick, and so was Bob. But they didn't realize that they were truly sick with the same disease, evidently, that the parents had had. And they finally got in sight, turned the corner, and got in sight of the Pelham house just as the storm struck. But there were several wagons there because this was meeting weekend. This was Saturday, and it was the weekend of the meeting, and the neighbors had come to worship. They didn't have a church. They worshiped in the house. And when they saw these children, they ran and brought them in and took care of them and asked them what about their parents. And, of course, it was a shock to the whole community that they had died suddenly and were gone. And in the night, that first night, they nursed Bob and little Liz, realizing that they were critically ill. And by the next afternoon, both of them had died. And they buried them in the cemetery, and this left Mimmie. And this is why I said the story is really about Mimmie. She had nobody at all. And Mr. Alec Furr, who was the grandfather of the Furr delegation, he was George Furr's father, said, Mimmie, you're going to be our little girl now. You're going to go home with us. You're going to live with us. And she was so grateful to him, she just ran to him and grabbed his hand. That's all she knew to do. But she didn't know that her brother and sister had died yet, and he had to take her outside. It had stormed all night, but it was daylight now, and he took her outside and talked to her, and she didn't even cry. She was past crying. She was in such shock, and only with the kindness shown her by the Furs and all of the people did she ever cry. But she did break down and cry finally when they took her with them. And Mr. Fur had a fine pair of black horses. And when the evening, this was Sunday now, by now, they buried the other two children. And the Furs had lost a baby before that, but they had one baby. And so he said, you'll help us take care of our baby. And they were in the wagon on the way home, and she thought she was a lucky little girl to have a family like this take care of her. Okay, this was the Ellick Fur family that grew up over there. I mean, they raised a family there at Midia. And she lived with them and grew from a little girl. When she got school age, by then they had a community school in the area, and Mr. Fur put her on a horse and sent her horseback to school to go to school as long as girls in that day went, which was what the country schools would give them. And she became the older sister of the family. Now, in this family, I have their names all in the story, but there were brothers and sisters born in the family, and she helped to raise them all. And the Furs were her family, and they all called her Aunt Mimmie. And though her name was Jarman, she spent the rest of her life with the Furs. Well, Mrs. Fur had the homecoming. All of these children grew up, and all of them except one of them, the younger brother. All the others married, but he was a bachelor until his later years he finally married. And all of those years, they had homecomings at the Fur's house. And she always helped Granny Fur with all the cooking and the homecoming for all of them. And when Mrs. Fur died, she continued it and continued to help keep the home and take care of Mr. Elliott Fur, who had taken care of her until his death. Then this left the bachelor son. She continued to keep house for him. And all of the children and their families loved her as if she'd been born to them, because she had been a mama to them all through the years, and assisted mama in everything. And when Will, this was the one that had, Will Fur, that had been a bachelor so long, when he married the May girl, Miss May over there, she felt like her work was done, and she sort of lost interest in life. But she continued to tell stories to the grandchildren. Now, Lucy Fur was one of those children, and Lucy Fur is my sister-in-law Betha's mother. And this is where I got started to researching the story. And she lived with that family until her death. They buried her in the Fur Cemetery, and on her grave, and I have stood by it, it is true, I have searched the records, and all of this story is true, except you had to piece together, what about that stranger? A stranger came, and nobody ever knew anything about him anymore, but he did bury the parents. And on her gravestone is Aunt Mimmie. And she is in the Fur Cemetery where she belongs. This is one pioneer story. This country is full of them. If I had the time, I could put together a volume of such stories of our ancestors. True stories that have to be pieced together by a little bit here and a little bit there. So many things in our heritage are begging to be done.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Some days it's just relaxing to sit back and you can almost put yourself in that time of
right.
or period of
it
life.
It just transports you 100 years back. But you see that this was our backbone too.
That's why we are here.
That's right. That's right. If they had not been there, we wouldn't be here.
Very true. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for
Outstanding.
letting me
As
do
you
it.
said, it would be a little different today.
Yes,
It's
a
quite
little different.
very nice.
But in my sock, I have a lot of them.
I'm sure you do. We hope that you've enjoyed listening to Mrs. LaGrone talk about Panola County and the years past and the way it was. And we invite you to join us each Thursday as Ms. LaGrone shares these wonderful stories and parts of history of Panola County with us. We thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Our viewing and listening audience, thank you for joining us, and join us again tomorrow as Sheriff Jack Ellett will be our guest. Until then, have a good day.